Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's discuss our next unit, which is Unit F, Legal and Ethical Responsibilities of the Healthcare Worker. So, a law. Law is defined as all the rules of conduct that are established and enforced by our authorities, whether it be our legislation, our government, police, any kind of community group that we trust to make those laws, okay? There are two kinds of laws. There's civil law and there is criminal law, and you need to know the difference in those two. So criminal law, a crime has been committed. It deals with wrongs against a person, property, or society. The offender or the person that has done wrong can go to jail or prison, okay? So examples of criminal law is practicing in the healthcare profession without a license, misuse of narcotics, theft, murder, things like that. Those are criminal acts that you can be arrested for and put in jail. An example of those two, there's a misdemeanor and a felony. A misdemeanor is a minor criminal offense, like a speeding ticket, trespassing, property theft, something minor like that. That is a misdemeanor. Now, a felony is a major crime, and it involves imprisonment, usually more than a year, and you can actually get the death penalty. And an example of that one is murder. How y'all like Medea up there? So civil law is a different type of law. So you've got criminal and civil. So civil law deals with legal relationships between people, and it protects a person's rights, okay? So when we're talking about health care and lawsuits and stuff, we're talking about civil law. So when we're breaking it down even further, two types of civil law are torts, T-O-R-T-S, torts, and contracts. So a tort is just a wrongful act that does not involve a contract, okay? So malpractice, negligence, assault and battery, invasion of privacy, all of those are considered torts, okay? Now, torts can be intentional, meaning it was willful, you meant to do it, and it can be unintentional, like I didn't mean to do that, it was on accident, okay? And most of the time, torts are unintentional. They're accidental when we're talking about healthcare issues. So malpractice is considered bad practice. Mal, if you think about our medical terminology, mal is bad practice, is bad. So malpractice is bad practice. So it is defined actually as the failure of a professional to use the degree of skill and learning commonly expected in that profession that results in injury or loss or damage. An example of malpractice is not cleaning equipment that you use on a patient and it leads to an infection in your patient, or performing a certain surgery, a minor surgery, without the proper training. You cannot do that. You've got to be properly trained. Negligence is failure to give care that's normally expected of someone in your position, okay? And intent is the difference there, okay? So malpractice is bad practice, and I kind of think of it as you done something that you shouldn't have done, okay? That's bad practice. And negligence, I feel, is more you didn't do something that you should have done. And again, intent is the big difference there. If you intended for something to happen, something bad to happen. Okay, so an example of negligence is forgetting to put up a bed rail and your patient falls out of bed and breaks a hip. Okay, or not reporting defective equipment or equipment that's broken and a patient gets hurt. Those are things that would be considered negligent. Okay, so assault. Assault is a threat or an attempt to hurt somebody, okay? They didn't hurt them. They didn't hurt them in any way. They just attempted to hurt somebody. So that's assault, okay? It's the threat. Battery is actual touching. It's when you actually physically touch someone. Now, most of the time, the assault and battery goes together because you're going to threaten them and then you're going to hit them. So usually the assault and battery goes together, but you have to remember that assault is actually the threat and battery is the unlawful touching, when you actually touch the person. Informed consent. It's when permission is granted voluntarily by a person who is of sound mind. Okay, and that's a big deal. We're going to talk about that after the procedure's been explained in terms that he or she can understand. So that's just like saying, okay, Chelsea, we're going to do a laparoscopic cholecystectomy on you. Now, what that means is we're going to go in with a tiny scope. We're going to make 4 tiny incisions on the upper right side of your abdomen, and we're going to take your gallbladder out. Do you understand? Do you have any questions? So that patient would have a chance to ask questions. It's been explained in terms that they can understand, and they have not had any kind of medication or anything like that, because that's what sound mind means, that they're not mentally incompetent, they're not under the influence of alcohol or drugs. So she can have all the information that she needs to make an informed decision about whether to sign to have surgery or not. Invasion of privacy. And guys, that's a fake patient there, so don't think that's real. So it involves unnecessarily exposing an individual, like this picture. You know, that person, that nurse or doctor, whatever, should have a drape across that patient. So if someone were to open that door to that patient's room, they wouldn't be exposed, okay? Now, invasion of privacy can be like you're giving the patient a bath, you're doing any kind of procedure, and you don't have the patient covered up so somebody can walk by the door and see them. It can also mean giving personal information out about a patient without their consent. That is also invasion of privacy, because what you tell, as the patient, what you tell your doctor or nurse needs to stay confidential. They have to know that you will not discuss their health information with anybody else, okay? So that's 2 different types. It can be actually physically invasion of privacy, like leaving a door open during a procedure, exposing your patient, or it can also mean revealing personal information about that patient without their consent. False imprisonment means restraining a person or restricting their freedom, okay? Keeping a patient hospitalized against their will. Now, if that patient is an adult and they're able to make decisions on their own, they're not incompetent for some odd reason, they can leave the hospital. Even if they are sick and dying, they have a right to leave the hospital. You cannot keep them there against their will. Now, this picture actually shows the patient being restrained to the bed. Now, you cannot restrain them just because you're tired of talking to them and getting them back in the bed, okay? You can restrain them if they are harming themselves or if they are pulling out their IV lines, things like that. But you have to have a doctor's order in order to put restraints on somebody, okay? Even if you have a patient that is confused, an elderly lady that's very confused, and she's trying to walk out the door of her room, and you're scared she's going to walk outside of the building, and you put a chair in front of her door so she can't walk out of her room, that is actually considered false imprisonment because you are stopping her from walking out of that room. Okay. Now, I get that you're doing it for her protection, but you legally cannot do that. Okay. Abuse. There are several different types of abuse, and you know that abuse results in physical harm, pain, or mental anguish. So we have physical abuse, verbal, psychological, and sexual. There are several different types of abuse. Now, laws in all states require reporting of any form of abuse to the proper authorities. If you have a patient that comes to see you and she repeatedly comes in with strange injuries, like she's got a broken arm or she's got a black eye or she's got a cut on her foot, or arm or whatever. If the stories that she's telling you how these things are happening, if they're not making any sense, you need to consider abuse, because people, and she's not just going to tell you she's being abused, okay? Most of the time, if stories don't match up to injuries, you need to be concerned. And if there is a question of abuse, you need to contact the police. Now, does that say I'm in trouble for reporting if it's not abuse? No, you have to do what you feel like in that moment that you need to do to try to protect your patient, okay? Defamation, okay? Defamation of character. You're damaging a person's name or their reputation by making statements that aren't true and that are malicious. They're mean, okay? So if you say something about somebody that's not true and it's going to hurt their reputation, that is considered defamation. You may hear defamation of character. So there's two types of defamation. There's libel, not libel, libel and slander. Now, libel is when that defamation is written. When you tweet it about somebody, when you post something on Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever, when you post it and it is written, that is libel. Now, the girls over here in this picture are gossiping. That's when it's considered slander, and that means that it's spoken. It's not written anywhere. It's not posted anywhere. It's just you're gossiping about someone else, and it's not true, and it harms someone's reputation. That is actually slander. Remember, slander, spoken, both of those are S's. Okay, contracts. When we're talking about contracts, a contract is just a voluntary agreement between two or more people, okay? You have three parts of a contract: offer, acceptance, consideration. Now, the offer is when a competent individual enters into a relationship with a healthcare provider and offers to be a patient. Acceptance is when that healthcare provider gives them an appointment. Consideration is paying your bill because you owe money there. So the offer is when you walk into the doctor's office and you say, hey, I've got a sore throat. Is there any way that you can see me today? That is the offer. You're offering to become a patient or have a relationship with that doctor. The acceptance is when that office staff says, absolutely, we can get you in this afternoon at 3 o'clock. That's the acceptance. That healthcare provider has accepted you as a patient and they're going to treat you. Okay? Consideration is when payment is made by the patient for what the doctor done. And that's very important, guys. Offer, acceptance, consideration. So there are two types of contracts. There is an implied contract and there's an expressed contract. So an implied contract is when things are just understood without us explaining them. Let me give you an example. A nurse walks up to you, especially right now, and you're in the doctor's office, and she walks up to you with a thermometer in her hand, and the thermometer is sticking out, and it's going towards your mouth. She doesn't have to explain to you that she's needing to take your temperature. You just know she's going to take your temperature, and you open your mouth for her to take your temperature. Same thing with blood pressure. I walk up to you, the nurse walks up to you with a stethoscope and a blood pressure cuff, and she goes towards your arm. She is implying that she's going to take your blood pressure, and you don't have to be explained. Nothing has to be explained to you. You just kind of hold your arm out and let them take your blood pressure. Okay? So that's implied. No explanation has to be given. Now, expressed is an actual agreement between parties, and it's in certain languages, and it can be orally or in writing. And the biggest example of an expressed contract is a surgical consent or a surgical permit. Okay? That's when we go back to Chelsea and we say, Chelsea needs her gallbladder removed. And the surgeon comes in and says, hey, Chelsea, my name is Dr. Jones. I'm going to be doing your surgery today. Let me explain what we're doing. And that surgeon goes over every single thing that's going to be done in that surgery. Ask Chelsea if she has any questions. All of her questions are answered, and that patient goes into that surgery knowing exactly what to expect. Okay, that surgeon expressed everything that needed to be expressed about having that surgery. Okay, so implied is when no explanation is needed, just see somebody going to do it and we do it. And expressed is when an actual contract is between the patient and the provider or the doctor or whatever, and he has explained everything in detail. Okay, so the surgical consent is an expressed contract.